4 weeks ago. At my wife's family barbecue. Her sister said something I won't forget. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. 38 guests. Lakeside estate. Polished wood deck. Catered brisket. Linen napkins pressed within an inch of their lives. The Whitmores didn't do casual. Even their relaxed events had staff in the background and imported hydrangeas lining the water. They thought it was a joke. They thought I'd do what I'd done for 7 years, half smile. Take the hit. Let it slide. They were wrong. I lifted my beer. Looked Caroline straight in the eye. And said, "Challenge accepted." A few confused laughs followed. My father-in-law cleared his throat. My mother-in-law redirected the table to dessert. My wife, Olivia, squeezed my knee under the table like I was overreacting to nothing. But something in me had gone still. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Clear. Because Caroline wasn't being cruel. She was being accurate. In their world, I was an accessory. The man Olivia married. The operational guy who handled details. The one who made sure things ran smoothly and stayed quiet while real conversations happened at the head of the table. No one defended me. Not when Caroline said it. Not when the table laughed. Not when Olivia chuckled into her wine glass. I didn't argue. I didn't call it out. I didn't give them a scene they could label dramatic. I just observed. The way Edward Whitmore leaned back like nothing important had been said. The way Margaret adjusted a floral arrangement while smiling politely. The way Olivia avoided my eyes. 7 years of small dismissals clicked into alignment in a single second. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice. That night, I stopped trying to be noticed. By Sheshja. The next morning, I had a plan. By the end of that day, Daniel Whitmore would no longer exist. And when I reappeared a year later, not in their house. Not at their table. But in a room they had no power over, they would look at me differently. Not because I demanded respect. Because I no longer needed it from them. My name is Daniel Mercer. It was Daniel Mercer long before it ever became Daniel Whitmore. I'm 33 years old. For 7 of those years, I was married to Olivia Whitmore, daughter of Edward Whitmore. Managing partner of Whitmore and Cole Private Equity in Charleston, South Carolina. Old Southern money. 3 generations in finance. The kind of family where their last name closed deals before numbers were even discussed. I wasn't born into that world. I grew up in Macon, Georgia. My father ran a small HVAC repair business. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse at a county hospital. We didn't have connections. We had schedules. We had invoices. We had work. I earned a scholarship to the University of Georgia. Studied hospitality operations and commercial property management. I liked systems. Logistics. The mechanics behind beautiful spaces. While other students chased prestige internships, I chased efficiency, how to turn an underperforming property into something profitable and elegant at the same time. I met Olivia during my senior year. I was bartending at a members-only golf club outside Savannah. She ordered a gin martini. Clean. Precise. She noticed the property redevelopment book under the counter. "You actually read that?" she asked. "I build things." I told her. "At least I plan to." She liked that answer. 3 months later, we were inseparable. Away from her family. She was different. Less curated. Less polished. We talked about building something together. About creating a life outside the expectations attached to her last name. 6 months after graduation, I received an offer from a boutique hotel group in Dallas. Assistant operations director. $72,000 base salary. Clear executive track. The same week, Olivia's father invited me to Charleston. Family proximity matters. Edward told me over bourbon in his study. Opportunities open when you're present. Olivia asked me to stay close. "My family is everything," she said. "We can build here." So I turned down Dallas. I accepted a mid-level operations role at a small waterfront event property in Charleston. $46,000 a year. $26,000 less than the offer in Texas. I told myself it was temporary. Strategic. It wasn't. 2 years in, Caroline launched a tech platform connecting luxury venues with vetted vendors. She needed family investment to attract outside capital. Edward turned to me at dinner. "You understand operations. Does it have potential?" "It does," I said honestly. "But the interface needs refinement." Caroline smiled like I'd just validated her thesis. 2 weeks later, she asked if I'd invest. I had $41,000 in savings. Years of discipline. My safety net. Olivia squeezed my hand under the table. "It's family." I wired $28,000. No speech. No ceremony. Just numbers leaving my account. 18 months later, the startup collapsed. Caroline transitioned seamlessly into a strategy role at her father's firm. When I asked about the investment, she looked almost amused. "That's what family does," she said. We support each other. That same year, Olivia quietly accumulated $15,000 in credit card debt after a failed retail concept she'd experimented with. She didn't want her father to know. I'll handle it, I told her. I paid it off. My balance dropped to zero. I told myself marriage meant absorbing impact. The erosion wasn't dramatic. It was incremental. At family gatherings, I wasn't seated near Edward when business conversations started. I was placed near distant relatives or out-of-town guests. When I offered insight on property valuation or operational scaling, Edward would respond with, "In high finance, Daniel, it works a bit differently," as if I needed a tutorial. Margaret would adjust my jacket before dinners. Maybe something more understated for the club. She'd say, "We don't want to look like we're trying too hard." Caroline corrected my pronunciation of European wine labels. Laughed when I used the wrong fork at formal settings. Small things. Public things. Olivia rarely intervened. Not cruelly. Just passively. That was worse. I became infrastructure. Useful. Replaceable. Silent. At work, I stopped pitching bold redevelopment concepts. At home, I stopped pushing back. I adapted my tone. My clothes. My opinions on restaurants. Politics. Art. I learned when to speak and when to let conversations move around me. My college friend Marcus visited once. 3 years into my marriage. We grabbed coffee downtown. "You good?" he asked. Studying me. "You don't sound like you." I brushed it off. But that night I sat in my car longer than necessary before going inside the Whitmore house. Not because I was afraid. Because I was tired. Not tired of working. Tired of calibrating. By year 7, I wasn't fighting for space anymore. I was managing around my own absence. So when Caroline said, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice," she wasn't wrong. In their ecosystem, I had already been minimized. The only mistake they made was assuming I would keep accepting it. The barbecue ended at 4. By then, my decision had already been made. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Strategically. The drive home was quiet. Olivia scrolled through her phone. Occasionally reading out details about an upcoming charity gala her mother was hosting. I watched the road. I replayed the moment at the table, the laughter. The ease of it. The absence of consequence. "You've been quiet," she said, finally, as we pulled into the driveway. "I'm thinking." "About what?" I turned off the engine. Looked at her. "When Caroline said no one would notice if I disappeared, did you think that was funny?" She exhaled. Already tired of the conversation. "Daniel. It was a joke." "You laughed." She was teasing. "That's how my family is." "That's how your family is." I repeated. She opened her door. "Don't turn this into something it's not." The door shut. Conversation over. For her. That night she went to bed at 10. Early Pilates class. I stayed downstairs. Not pacing. Not spiraling. Just sitting at the kitchen island in the dark. I opened my laptop at 10. No dramatic searches. No rage-fueled typing. Apartments in Charlotte. Furnished. Month-to-month leases. Commercial property acquisition listings. Divorce attorneys in Charleston. I created a document titled, I listed assets. Joint accounts. Outstanding bills. My contributions over 7 years. Screenshots of bank transfers from the Caroline investment. The $15,000 credit card payoff. Mortgage splits. Utility history. Not to argue. To close cleanly. At Doy's Prezecha. I transferred copies of every financial document to a private encrypted drive. I drafted a short letter. Clinical. Direct. No blame. No accusations. The plan was fully formed. I would take exactly half of what was legally mine. Not a dollar more. I would prepay my portion of upcoming bills. I would document every transaction. And I would leave without confrontation. Because the most dangerous thing you can do in a power imbalance is remove yourself without asking permission. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. This wasn't anger. This was alignment. Olivia's alarm went off. She showered. Dressed. Kissed my forehead. "Love you," she said automatically. "Drive safe." I replied. Her car pulled out of the driveway at 6. I waited 60 seconds. Then I stood up. Challenge accepted. The house was silent. No speeches. No hesitation. I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "You good?" "I'm leaving today," I said. Pause. Not shock. Not questions. "What do you need?" "A truck. 2 hours of muscle. Discretion." "I'm on my way." Sishawu. He was in the driveway with a rented cargo van and black coffee. We didn't talk about feelings. We started packing. Bedroom first. Only what was mine. Not the tailored jackets Margaret had suggested. Not the watch Edward gifted me for joining the family. Just the clothes I'd bought before the Whitmores curated my closet. My laptop. Hard drives. Portfolio binders. Framed photo of my parents standing in front of my father's HVAC truck. College diploma. Marcus picked up a crystal decanter from the living room shelf. Yours. He set it back. Everything that actually belonged to Daniel Mercer fit into 6 boxes and 2 duffel bags. 7 years reduced to cargo space. At Zech. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. Joint account balance. Losh Armayan. Baba Sisher. I ran the math twice. Senchi Imayan. Sibai Arsher. I transferred exactly that amount into the separate account I had maintained quietly for years, the one Olivia had once suggested we simplify into a joint structure. Then I opened our shared expense spreadsheet. Mortgage due in 12 days. Lanshangyi Bamayan. My half. Itsenling Wushamayan. Utilities average. My half. HOA quarterly fee. My half. I scheduled payments totaling $1,510. Covering my share of every outstanding obligation. Marcus leaned against the doorway. You could take more. I won't. After everything you put in. That's the point. Clean exits don't leave leverage. I took screenshots of every transfer. Saved PDFs. Created a folder labeled documentation. Add-in Sprezicha. I printed the letter. Olivia. I'm taking time away to reassess this marriage. I've transferred only what is legally mine and prepaid my portion of all current obligations. My attorney will contact yours regarding next steps. Daniel. No accusations. No emotional inventory. Next to it, I placed a second sheet of paper. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. Caroline Whitmore. July 23rd. Lakeside Estate. Approx. 38 witnesses. Facts only. Then I removed my wedding ring. I didn't stare at it. Didn't weigh the symbolism. I slid it off and placed it on top of the letter. Metal leaving skin. At Doisprezecha. The van was loaded. I walked through the house once more. White walls. Open concept kitchen. Furniture chosen from Margaret's preferred designer. Framed photos from Whitmore charity galas. None from my side of the family displayed prominently. I locked the door behind me. No note on the fridge. No dramatic goodbye. We were on I-26 heading north. I didn't look back when we passed the exit toward the Whitmore estate. My phone began vibrating. Olivia. Ignored. Then again. Ignored. Then a string of messages. Where are you? What is this? Call me right now. This is insane. My mother is asking questions. No mention of the barbecue. No mention of Caroline's comment. No acknowledgement. We crossed into North Carolina. The welcome sign flashed past the windshield. For the first time in years, I felt oxygen hit the bottom of my lungs. Not freedom, control. I checked into a short-term corporate rental in Charlotte at 6. Modest. Clean. Anonymous. Marcus set the last box inside the apartment. You sure? He asked. I've never been more sure. He nodded once. No lecture. No doubt. After he left, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed and turned my phone back on briefly. 34 missed calls. I read the preview texts without opening them. Daniel. This is humiliating. You're overreacting. We can talk when you calm down. At least tell me where you are. No accountability. No ownership. I powered the phone off again. Took a shower. Ordered takeout. And slept 8 uninterrupted hours. No negotiation. No recalibration. No performance. Daniel Whitmore was gone. Daniel Mercer was operational again. Charlotte didn't welcome me with drama. It welcomed me with routine. That was enough. The first week was logistics. New bank account at a regional credit union. New phone number. Mail forwarding through a P. I updated my LinkedIn quietly, no announcement. No new beginnings post. Just a clean line. Hospitality operations and property redevelopment Charlotte. NC. I wasn't running. I was repositioning. Within 10 days. I had 3 interviews. The 4th was the one that mattered. Harbor Crest Holdings. A boutique hospitality group that specialized in distressed historic properties. The founder, Richard Hale, met me in a stripped-down warehouse office overlooking a half-renovated waterfront estate. I don't care about your resume, he said, leaning back in a metal chair. Everyone in this industry can run a banquet. Show me what you see when you look at that building. He pointed through the open bay door at a crumbling 1920s manor overlooking Lake Norman. I studied it for maybe 15 seconds. Remove the interior partitions, I said. Open flow from terrace to main hall. Preserve the original brick. Convert the east wing into prep kitchens. Garden ceremony space facing the water. You don't sell square footage. You sell atmosphere. Richard didn't smile. Start Monday. Operations Director. 62,000 base. Performance bonuses tied to revenue growth. Potential equity after 12 months of measurable turnaround. I took it without negotiation. The property was called the Aldridge Estate. When I first walked through it, the floors were warped. Chandeliers were missing crystals. The place smelled like old insulation and forgotten money. Perfect. For 3 months. I lived inside that renovation. Contractors etc. Budget reviews at noon. Vendor negotiations at 6 p. I redesigned event flow systems. Cut unnecessary overhead. Implemented performance tracking metrics the previous management had ignored. No one corrected my tone. No one adjusted my jacket. No one laughed when I spoke. By month 4, bookings increased 37%. By month 5, we were fully booked through the following spring. Richard called me into his office on a Tuesday afternoon. "You turned this around faster than projected," he said. "Client satisfaction is up. Referral rate doubled. You think like an owner. I operate like one." He slid a document across the desk. Senior operations partner. 74,000 salary effective immediately. 10% equity in Aldridge. Vesting immediately. Additional 20% available upon acquisition of the adjacent lake property. I read the contract once. I'm in. Month 7. We acquired the adjacent property, a foreclosed lakefront manor with better structural integrity and panoramic views. Renovation budget. 1 million. I led it entirely. I didn't ask permission for design decisions. I didn't dilute ideas to make anyone comfortable. I built it the way I saw it, modern Southern minimalism layered over preserved architecture. When the first wedding booked before renovations were fully complete, Richard looked at me and said, "You don't just manage space. You create leverage." That mattered more than praise. Around month 8, I started therapy. Not because I was falling apart. Because I wanted clarity. Helen Brooks specialized in power dynamics and identity erosion within high-status families. "What actually broke you?" she asked in our 3rd session. "Nothing broke me," I said. "I just stopped participating." She nodded. Withdrawal is still a response to injury. We dissected 7 years in pieces. Not emotionally dramatic pieces. Structural ones. Moments where I accepted minimization to keep peace. Moments where silence felt easier than confrontation. Moments where I confused tolerance with partnership. "You weren't invisible," she said once. "You were unacknowledged. There's a difference." By month 10, my income between salary and distributions was approaching $95,000 annually. I upgraded from the studio apartment to a clean 2-bedroom overlooking the water. Nothing extravagant. Just functional. I started lifting again. 5 mornings a week. Not for transformation. For discipline. I cut my hair shorter. Stopped wearing neutral tones out of habit. Invested in tailored suits that fit my frame instead of someone else's aesthetic. The biggest change wasn't external. I stopped anticipating criticism. I spoke without pre-editing. In month 9, I met Lauren. She was an architect working on a mixed-use development downtown. We met at a contractor, networking dinner. She asked what I did. I redevelop properties. I said, I build them into something better than they were. She nodded. I like people who fix structures instead of complaining about them. We kept talking. She never once asked about my ex-wife's family name. Never once measured my worth against old money. If I didn't text for 12 hours because I was on site, she assumed I was working. Not withdrawing. It was quiet. Respectful. Uncomplicated. By month 12, Aldridge Estate and the new lake property renamed Crestview Manor were booked 18 months out. Combined revenue projections exceeded initial forecasts by 22%. Richard called me into his office again. "You've earned the remaining equity," he said. 30% stake in Crestview. Effective immediately. I signed. Ownership changes posture. Not physically. Internally. By August 1 year and 3 weeks after the barbecue, I was no longer reacting to the Whitmores. I wasn't building to prove them wrong. I was building because that's what I do. Then I got a call from an industry contact in Charleston. "Hey," he said casually. "Heard the Whitmore wedding venue burned down. Kitchen fire. Total loss for the season." I paused. "When's the wedding?" "Mid-August. 6 weeks out." "They're scrambling." I opened our booking calendar. One Saturday, in August. Available. The inquiry came 2 days later through our website. Client. Caroline Whitmore. Budget. High 6 figures. Date requested. August 17th. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Richard stepped into my office. "Problem. I know this client." He studied my expression. "You want to decline?" I thought about it. Then I shook my head. "They're coming here," I said calmly. "On my terms." He didn't ask for more. I typed the response. Professional. Neutral. Precise. "We can accommodate August 17th. Venue rental $22,000. Standard peak season rate. All coordination through management. Contract attached. Signed. Daniel Mercer. Owner and operating partner. Crestview Manor. They signed within 48 hours. They had no other option. They had no idea who owned the property. Challenge accepted. 6 weeks before Caroline's wedding. The Whitmores lost their venue. The Magnolia House, Charleston's most established waterfront estate, suffered a late-night kitchen fire in early July. No injuries. Significant structural damage. Indefinite closure. Peak wedding season. August bookings impossible to replace. The hospitality industry is smaller than people think. Word travels fast through planners, caterers, floral designers. Within 48 hours, everyone knew a high-budget Whitmore wedding was suddenly homeless. Caroline's planner expanded her search radius. 50 miles. 75. 100. Fully booked. Except for one Saturday. August 17th. Crestview Manor. The inquiry came through our website on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly projections. Subject line. Urgent availability request. Bride. Caroline Whitmore. Groom. Ethan Caldwell. Budget. Flexible. Non-negotiable. I didn't react outwardly. I read it twice. Richard stepped into my office and shut the door behind him. You good? I know the bride. Bad blood. Not anymore. He waited. You want to decline? He asked. It would have been easy. Professional. Clean. But declining would have been avoidance. I wasn't avoiding anything. No. I said evenly. We accept. Richard studied my face for a long moment. Then nodded. Then we execute flawlessly. That was always the rule. I responded within the hour. Standard rate. $22,000. Venue rental. Peak season contract. Full payment schedule up front. All communication routed through management. Owner maintains limited availability for direct client contact. Signed. Daniel Mercer. Owner and operating partner. Crestview Manor. The signed contract arrived 2 days later. No negotiation. No questions. They didn't have leverage. Over the next 6 weeks, every detail came through the planner. Floral concepts. Seating charts. Lighting adjustments. Menu tastings. Caroline requested a direct call with the owner to ensure alignment with family standards. My assistant responded professionally. Ownership oversees operations but does not engage in direct pre-event consultation. We scheduled venue walkthroughs when I was offsite. She toured the property twice. We never crossed paths. Every email. Every detail. Every request passed through me. Not to sabotage. To perfect. Because this wasn't revenge. This was business. And I intended for it to be impeccable. 1 week before the wedding, I reviewed final logistics personally. Guest list over 200. High-profile attendees. Media discretion requested. Full privacy clause signed. They were bringing their world into mine. On my property. Under my contract. On my timeline. The night before the wedding. I stood alone in the grand hall of Crestview Manor after the final lighting test. Crystal chandeliers restored to full brilliance. Lake visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. Garden terrace aligned perfectly for a sunset ceremony. This wasn't the man who sat at the edge of the Whitmore table. This was the man who owned the room. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt prepared. Caroline once said if I disappeared, no one would notice. Tomorrow, she would notice. Not because I forced her to. Because she would be standing inside something I built. August 17th. Exactly 1 year and 3 weeks after the barbecue. I arrived at Crestview Manor at 5. Ceremony scheduled for 2. Reception at 5. I walked the property alone before staff call time. Garden terrace chairs aligned in clean symmetry. Aisle centered toward the lake. Cocktail courtyard bar stations positioned for smooth circulation. Reception hall lighting programmed to shift from warm gold at dinner to low amber during dancing. Kitchen flow time to the minute. Every detail accounted for. At noon, I gathered the team. Today runs at our standard. I said. No shortcuts. No exceptions. They nodded. They didn't need the speech. They knew how I operated. Black SUVs began pulling into the circular drive. I watched from the upper balcony. Edward Whitmore stepped out first. Same posture. Same controlled authority. Margaret followed. Adjusting her sunglasses. Composed. Evaluating. Olivia stepped out of another vehicle. For a fraction of a second. My breath paused. Then it steadied. They looked smaller outside their territory. The ceremony began. Caroline walked down the aisle in a gown that likely cost more than my first year's salary. The lake shimmered behind her. The setup was flawless. Timing exact. Sound crisp. I stayed out of sight. Not hiding. Waiting. Cocktail hour transitioned smoothly at 4. I stepped into my office and changed. Dark tailored suit. No Whitmore-approved restraint. No muted tones. Precision. Presence. Dinner service was underway. I walked into the reception hall. Not rushed. Not theatrical. Measured. Staff parted slightly without thinking. That's when Caroline saw me. She was mid-sentence at the head table. Her eyes locked onto mine across the room. Confusion first. Recognition second. Color drained from her face. Daniel. The word carried farther than she intended. Conversations around her table faltered. Edward turned. Margaret froze. Olivia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I continued walking until I reached the bride's table. Professional smile. Controlled tone. Good evening. I said. I'm Daniel Mercer, owner and operating partner of Crestview Manor. I wanted to personally ensure everything meets your expectations. Silence. Not polite silence. Impact silence. Caroline blinked. You own this place. 30%. I replied evenly. Operational control. Edward stood abruptly. This is highly irregular. I turned toward him calmly. Is it? Mr. Whitmore, your daughter signed a standard commercial contract. You're receiving full service at agreed market rate. He searched for leverage. There wasn't any. Margaret recovered first. Social mask sliding back into place. Well, she said thinly. This venue is extraordinary. Thank you. I said. Caroline's jaw tightened. Why didn't anyone tell us? You never asked who owned it. I replied. Only whether it was available. Olivia stood slowly from her chair. Daniel. She said quietly. You look different, I offered. Stronger. Unapologetic. Present. Yes. She finished. I nodded once. You were right. I said. Turning back to Caroline. About something. Her eyes flickered. At the barbecue. You said if I disappeared, no one would notice. The surrounding tables had gone completely still. You were correct in one sense. I did disappear. From a place where I was optional. I gestured subtly to the hall, the lighting. The staff precision. The atmosphere humming under control. This, I said calmly, is what I build when I'm not shrinking to fit someone else's table. No raised voice. No sarcasm. Just fact. Edward attempted authority again. If we had known, you would have what I asked evenly. Found another venue. You contacted 12 before us. We were the only availability within 100 miles. He stopped speaking. Because he knew it was true. I stepped back slightly. This is your daughter's wedding. I said. It will be flawless. Then I turned and walked away. Not abruptly. Not triumphantly. Just finished. From the far side of the room. I could feel the shift. They weren't laughing now. They weren't correcting my posture. They weren't explaining how finance works. They were guests. On my property. Edward delivered the father of the bride toast. Family is everything. He said. I stood near the back wall beside Richard. Comfortable, Richard murmured. The irony didn't sting. It clarified. Olivia approached me near the service corridor. Can we talk? This is a live event. I said calmly. We'll keep it brief. I didn't know. She said. About all this. About you building. I told you for 7 years who I was. I replied. You just preferred the quieter version. Her eyes softened. Regret. Recognition. Too late. The first dance began. Music drifted across the hall. I stepped onto the terrace overlooking the lake. The water reflected gold from the reception lights. I felt no adrenaline. No vindication. Just balance. 1 year ago. I sat at their table. Tonight. They sat at mine. Not because I forced them to. Because I built something they needed. Caroline had challenged me to disappear. I did. Then I built a room too significant to ignore. The reception wound down around 10. Guests filtered toward valet. Laughter softened into tired conversation. The band shifted into slower tracks as staff began discreet breakdown of secondary stations. I stood in my office reviewing final catering numbers when there was a knock on the door. Not aggressive. Measured. Come in. Olivia stepped inside and closed the door behind her. For a moment. Neither of us spoke. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Structurally, like something foundational had shifted under her. I didn't know you were capable of this. She said finally. Glancing around the office. Then out the window toward the lit terrace. I was always capable. I replied. Just not in your family's format. She absorbed that. I've been in therapy. She said. Since you left. I nodded once. No reaction. I didn't understand what you meant when you said challenge accepted. I thought you were being dramatic. I wasn't. She exhaled slowly. Caroline shouldn't have said that. She said what everyone was already comfortable believing. Silence. I should have defended you. She said. No anger in it. Just acknowledgement. She looked at me directly. Is there any part of you that would consider Trying again? Not now. But eventually. I studied her face carefully. I felt no resentment. No pull. No unfinished thread. Just distance. We didn't fail because of one comment. I said. We failed because I kept adjusting and you kept accepting it. Her jaw tightened slightly. Truth does that. I don't live like that anymore. She nodded slowly. Tears gathered but didn't fall. I see that. That's good. I said. You should. Another pause. I'm moving to Boston, she said quietly, leaving my father's firm. I need space too. That's probably healthy. There was no bitterness in my voice. No ownership. No nostalgia. Just neutrality. She stepped closer. Then stopped herself. I'm sorry I didn't see you, she said. I see myself now. I replied. That's enough. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We didn't drag it out. She opened the door and stepped back into the hallway noise of the reception. That was the last private conversation we ever had. At Sprzezica. The final guests exited. Caroline departed in a vintage car under sparklers and applause. The Whitmore vehicles pulled out of the drive one by one. But none of them looked toward my office window. Perfect symmetry. They had ignored me when I joined their family. Tonight, they avoided looking at me and mine. The difference was simple. This time, I didn't need them to see me. The morning after the wedding, I was back at Crestview Manor by 8. No dramatic aftermath. No emotional hangover. Just numbers. Final invoices. Vendor reconciliations. Damage checks. Staff debrief. The Whitmore wedding had been flawless. Zero timing delays. Zero complaints. Full payment cleared. Richard stepped into my office around 9. You good? He asked. Better than good. He nodded once. Then he set a folder on my desk. I ran updated projections after last night. 3 direct inquiries already referenced the event. 2 corporate buyouts. 1 luxury planner from Atlanta wants a tour. I leaned back in my chair. Word of mouth. The only currency that matters in this industry. We should adjust pricing, I said. Demand curve just shifted. Richard smiled faintly. Already did. By Tuesday. Our calendar was fully booked through December of the following year. 18 months solid. Not because of the Whitmore name. Not because of old money networks. Because the execution spoke for itself. On Wednesday afternoon, Richard called a formal meeting. I've reviewed performance metrics for the past 12 months. He said. Sliding updated equity documents across the table. You've outperformed every benchmark we set. I scanned the paperwork. 40% equity stake. Effective immediately. That's aggressive. I said. It's accurate. He replied. You built this brand. I signed without ceremony. Ownership isn't loud. It's leverage. That evening, I met my parents for dinner when they drove up from Georgia to see the property in person for the first time. My father walked through the reception hall slowly. Hands in his pockets. You did this, he asked quietly. He nodded once. No dramatic praise. Just a firm grip on my shoulder. My mother stood near the lake-facing windows. You look like yourself again, she said. I didn't realize how much that mattered until she said it. I am, I replied. We ate at a small restaurant afterward. No white tablecloths. No curated wine lectures. Just conversation. You ever regret it? My father asked. Leaving. He nodded. I thought about it carefully. I regret the time. I said. Not the decision. He seemed satisfied with that. Friday afternoon. I received a LinkedIn message from Edward Whitmore. Short. Daniel. I misjudged you. That's on me. If you're ever open to discussing development partnerships. My door is open. I read it twice. No apology. Just recalibration. I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. I wasn't looking for access to his table anymore. I had my own. Later that evening, Lauren and I walked along the lake path behind Crestview Manor. Sunset hit the water in a way that made the entire property look unreal. You've been quiet, she said. Just thinking. About them. About how small that world feels now. She smiled slightly. Growth does that. I stopped walking for a moment. 1 year ago. I said. I thought disappearing meant losing everything. And now I know disappearing from the wrong room is how you find the right one. She squeezed my hand but didn't romanticize it. Lauren never tried to occupy space I needed to stand in myself. The following Monday, I reviewed our quarterly financial summary. Revenue up 30%. Operating margin, optimized. Forward bookings secured through late 2026. Crestview Manor wasn't just surviving. It was dominant. Not flashy. Strategic. Sustainable. That afternoon, I opened our company's Instagram page. Selected 3 photos from the Whitmore wedding, the garden ceremony at golden hour. The chandelier-lit reception. The lake reflecting sparklers during their send-off. I wrote a simple caption. Congratulations to Caroline and Ethan. Wishing you a lifetime of clarity. No undertones. No bitterness. Professional. Within hours. Inquiries climbed again. That's the thing about reputation. It compounds. 3 months later. I heard through industry channels that Edward had stepped back from several development deals. Olivia had relocated to Boston permanently. Caroline had moved to New York. Their orbit shifted. Mine didn't. I stayed. Built. Expanded. By the end of the year, Crestview Manor acquired a second adjacent parcel, future boutique guest cottages. We weren't chasing prestige. We were building infrastructure. One evening, standing alone in the empty reception hall, after a corporate event teardown, I replayed the barbecue in my head. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. She had meant it as dismissal. What she gave me was direction. The opposite of disappearing isn't being noticed. It's becoming so structurally grounded in your own life that whether someone notices becomes irrelevant. Revenge is reactive. Peace is positional. I didn't win because they were embarrassed. I won because I removed myself from a system that required me to be smaller. Sometimes the most controlled response to disrespect isn't confrontation. It's exit. And sometimes the cleanest way to prove your value isn't by demanding a seat at someone else's table. It's by building one so solid they have to reserve it. If you've ever felt optional in a room that required your silence, understand something. You're not too sensitive. You're misaligned. You don't negotiate with environments designed to minimize you. You outgrow them. 1 year ago, I accepted a challenge. Not to vanish. To rebuild. And now, no one who matters fails to notice. Take care.